Have you ever wondered if God is indifferent, sadistic, or if he doesn't exist at all? This is a question that has plagued the minds of philosophers, scholars, and everyday people alike for centuries. It's an existential question that probes the very nature and character of what we perceive as the divine. It's a question that, when pondered deeply, can lead to a variety of interpretations and viewpoints. Today, we're going to delve into 3 of these viewpoints, each offering a unique perspective on the character and nature of God. First, we'll explore the idea of an indifferent God, a divine being that exists but remains detached and uninterested in the affairs of humans. This viewpoint poses that God is like a watchmaker, who after creating the intricate timepiece that is our universe, steps back to let it run on its own, without further intervention or interference. Next, we'll discuss the notion of a sadistic God, a deity who not only exists and involves himself in human affairs, but does so with cruel and malicious intent. This perspective paints a picture of God as a cosmic puppeteer, deriving some form of pleasure or satisfaction from the suffering and chaos in the world. Finally, we'll examine the belief in the non-existence of God, a viewpoint held by atheists and agnostics. This perspective argues that the suffering, pain, and injustices in the world are evidence of the absence of a divine being, or at least one that is benevolent and caring. But remember, these are viewpoints, not definitive answers. They are perspectives that have been formed and shaped by countless individuals throughout history, each trying to make sense of the world and the divine in their own way. So buckle up, because we're about to embark on a philosophical journey that will challenge our understanding of God and the universe. Now that we've introduced our topic, let's delve into each viewpoint. First, we explore the viewpoint of God as indifferent. This perspective paints a picture of a divine being who, while potentially omnipotent and omniscient, chooses to remain aloof from the affairs of humanity. Picture this: a world struck by natural disasters, earthquakes that swallow entire communities, hurricanes that decimate cities, wildfires that consume thousands of acres, leaving behind only ashes and despair. There are diseases that ravage populations, famine that leaves millions starved, and tragedies that seemingly occur without any rhyme or reason. Where is divine intervention amidst these calamities? Some argue that these are not punishments nor trials, but simply the random occurrences of an indifferent universe, a universe presided over by an indifferent God. They propose that the world in all its beauty and brutality operates according to natural laws and processes, and that God does not intervene to prevent disaster, nor does he cause it. In this viewpoint, God is like an artist who has completed a masterpiece, then steps back to let it exist independently, without interfering in its evolution or responding to its needs. This image of God is akin to a watchmaker who assembles a timepiece, winds it up, and then allows it to tick away without further interference. This perspective is not without its critics, of course. Many argue that it paints a picture of a cold and uncaring God, a stark contrast to the loving, compassionate deity depicted in many religious texts. But proponents of the indifferent God viewpoint counter that their perspective does not necessarily negate God's love or compassion. Instead, they argue, it simply suggests that God's love is expressed differently, not through direct intervention, but through the very laws of nature and the freedom he grants humanity. The indifferent God viewpoint raises challenging questions about the nature of divine love, the problem of evil, and the role of free will. It's a perspective that doesn't provide easy answers but encourages deep thought and contemplation. This viewpoint suggests that if God exists, he chooses not to interfere with human affairs. Scene script. Next, we examine the viewpoint of God as sadistic. This perspective is a stark contrast to the traditional concept of an all-loving deity. Those who hold this view believe that if God exists and is omnipotent, he must derive some form of pleasure or satisfaction from human suffering, given the pervasive and intense suffering in our world. Let's delve into this argument a bit further. We live in a world where pain, distress, and hardship are commonplace. Natural disasters, diseases, wars, and countless instances of personal anguish occur regularly. This leads to the question, if God is all-powerful and all-loving, why is there so much suffering? This is known as the problem of evil. Some argue that an all-loving God wouldn't permit such widespread suffering unless he took pleasure in it, thus painting God as sadistic. This viewpoint is often adopted by those who struggle to reconcile the idea of a loving deity with the reality of our world's pain. However, it's important to note that this perspective is not universally accepted. Many argue that suffering could serve a greater purpose or be a consequence of free will. Yet, the proponents of the Sadistic God viewpoint challenge this, asking why an omnipotent deity would not simply create a world where suffering is not necessary for growth or learning. They question, if God is all-knowing, wouldn't he have foreseen the pain that comes with free will and chosen a different path? If he is all-powerful, couldn't he have designed a world without natural disasters or diseases? And if he is all-loving, why would he allow such pain and suffering to persist? These questions, while challenging, are essential in exploring the concept of God. They force us to examine our beliefs and question traditional theological narratives. Yet despite the compelling arguments, this viewpoint remains a matter of personal belief and interpretation, much like the other perspectives on God's nature. This viewpoint suggests that if God exists, he takes pleasure in human suffering. Finally, we consider the viewpoint that God does not exist. This perspective is often associated with atheism and agnosticism, but encompasses a broad range of beliefs and ideas. One of the main arguments for this viewpoint is rooted in science, specifically in theories about the origin of the universe. The Big Bang theory, for instance, posits that the universe began as a singularity, a point of infinite density and temperature, and has been expanding ever since. Proponents of this theory suggest that the natural laws governing the universe are sufficient to explain its existence, without the need for a divine creator. In the realm of biology, the theory of evolution by natural selection provides a robust explanation for the diversity and complexity of life on Earth. This theory posits that species evolve over time through a process of mutation and selection, with the fittest individuals passing on their genes to the next generation. Again, proponents argue that this natural process negates the need for a divine designer. Another argument for the non-existence of God stems from the lack of tangible evidence. Despite centuries of philosophical and theological debate, no concrete, universally accepted proof of God's existence has been put forth. Those who argue for God's non-existence often point to this lack of evidence as a strong indicator that God is a human construct, rather than an objective reality. Furthermore, the existence of suffering and evil in the world is often cited as evidence against a benevolent God. This argument, known as the problem of evil, questions why a loving and all-powerful God would allow such suffering to exist. In essence, this viewpoint suggests that the universe and life as we know it can be fully explained by natural processes and laws. It proposes that the hardships and joys of life are not influenced by a higher power but are simply part of the human experience. This perspective offers a different lens through which to view our existence, emphasizing the role of chance, natural processes, and human agency in shaping our world and our lives. This viewpoint suggests that the hardships and joys of life are not influenced by a higher power, but are simply part of the human experience. Having explored these viewpoints, we're left with more questions than answers. We've dived deep into the existential question of God's nature, looking at three distinct perspectives that people around the world hold. First, we considered the idea of an indifferent God, a deity who, though omnipotent, chooses to remain uninvolved in human affairs. This viewpoint posits that God is a distant observer, impartial, and disconnected from our day-to-day lives. It's a perspective that leaves room for human autonomy, but also raises questions about the purpose and meaning of life, and whether we're truly alone in the universe. Next, we examined the notion of a sadistic God, one who not only observes human suffering but also, perhaps, derives some form of pleasure or satisfaction from it. This is a challenging concept to grapple with, especially when we consider the scale of suffering in the world. It's a view that prompts us to re-evaluate the traditional image of a benevolent creator, and forces us to confront the harsh realities of existence. Finally, we explored the idea of a non-existent God, a perspective that dismisses divine intervention altogether. This viewpoint suggests that the universe operates on natural laws and random chance, leaving no room for a supernatural being. It's a belief that empowers us to take full responsibility for our actions and our world, but also strips away the comforting notion of a guiding hand. Each of these views presents its own set of questions, challenges, and implications. The nature of God's character continues to be a subject of debate, a puzzle that humanity has been trying to piece together for centuries. We've only just scratched the surface of this complex topic, and there's so much more to uncover. Regardless of where you stand on this topic, one thing is clear. The question of God's existence and character continues to provoke thought and discussion. And perhaps, in the end, it's not about finding a definitive answer, but about the journey of questioning and seeking that truly matters.